We have been having the same fight since we met.
It's time to dive into Randall and Beth's relationship from beginning to now. So let's break down season 3, episode 17 of This Is Us and find out just what happened. What's going on, you lovely people? Lacey here, and man, this week's episode of This Is Us was definitely an intense one, especially for you Randall and Beth shippers out there. It is titled R&B, and it pretty much picks up where we left off with Randall and Beth's big fight. Now, throughout the first 2 seasons, I've got to say that we've seen Randall and Beth have some little squabbles, but they seemed like the perfect couple since the beginning of the show. Until this season when they had that whole election drama and also that future flash forward, and you could just tell that the trouble was on the horizon. And in this episode, it's like a therapy session. We are getting down to the root of the trouble or the problem. We're also just kind of realizing that, this couple is human. They're not perfect. They're like the rest of us, and they have their intense arguments. But with the last episode, it seemed like these two were definitely hitting that pinnacle fight, and you guys were very passionate in the comments of my video from last week about whether you were Team Beth or Team Randall, and both sides had some really great points and arguments. I'm actually curious if your views have changed after this episode, but I can also see why you lean a little to one side over the other. But I'm going to talk more about my kind of feelings after recapping this episode. And also, just like we kind of saw Randall go too far with what he said to Beth in the last episode, this episode finds Beth going too far with what she says to Randall. And one of you commenters, you awesome viewers, did point out, and I am so sorry that I forgot to write your username down this time, but you pointed out that the big problems that some of the big 3 have faced so far on the show mirror exactly some of the big issues that Jack and Rebecca had with their big fights. And that actually is kind of addressed in this episode in relation to Beth and Randall. So let's go ahead and break it all down. So we pick up where last week's episode left off with Randall and Beth closing their bedroom door to really hash things out. Now, while Randall says he supports Beth with everything, with her dancing dream, and he's doing his best to make it back for recitals and be home for the girls when she teaches, and that he wants her to have a life of her own.
For the past 20 years, I have stood by your side through every whim, every pipe dream, every flight of fancy that you can think of. And for the first time, I have a flight of fancy.
Oh man, yeah, things are getting tense, and that's when Beth says that they've been having the same fight since they met. And that's when we start to flash back to their whole relationship, starting with their first meeting to see that same fight played out over the years. So we kind of saw a little bit of this first meeting in a previous episode in Beth's, standalone episode. But here we are, we see Randall purposefully kind of bump into Beth at the sign-in table at this college mixer. And then we get to see the Cyrano de Bergerac of Kevin, telling Randall what to say when calling Beth to ask her out, which has been mentioned previously on the show. So Randall gets all dressed up for this first date and takes Beth to this super nice restaurant and has gone all out buying lots of flowers and everything. And it seems like it's a little too much for Beth, who's just, hanging out in a nice little hoodie that's real comfortable. And it gets to be even more of too much when she finds out that he's been asking around about her, and then he just starts to spill everything about his life, about his adoption story and all that. You can see Beth continue to get a little overwhelmed, like, dude, you're oversharing for a first date. But they then have a little bit of a bonding moment over both losing their father. Beth, though, gets upset when the waiter asks them to pay for their meal ahead of time because of the color of their skin, and Randall easily gives in and starts to pay, but Beth is like, no, this is not right, and she pretty much gets up and says they're not eating here, and tells Randall, that this is not her idea of a perfect date, while he's all like, I just wanted things to be perfect for you. And Beth says her idea of a perfect date is just ginger beer and nachos. And Randall thinks that Beth just likes to start fights, but Beth is pretty much at the end of this argument like, don't call me again. Randall, however, returns home to his dorm room, surprisingly not defeated, but telling his roommate he's going to marry Beth. Flash forward to where Beth and Randall have been dating for 7 years, and Randall proposes to Beth, but she says no, she's not ready yet. As we learn, Randall has proposed multiple times to Beth. Now they're about to have their, ritual Sunday dinner with Rebecca, but Beth seems like she's feeling a bit smothered and is tired of this tradition, just wants a Sunday night to themselves. So she's like, hey Randall, why don't we go mini golfing like we used to? And Randall's like, oh, guess what? Yeah, that sounds great. Mom will love that. Yeah, Randall invites Rebecca along for this mini golf date. And when Rebecca brings up all the different proposals, Beth has finally had it with Randall telling his mom all their personal business. And she says it's not normal to share that much of their personal life with his mom. Beth then kind of snaps at Rebecca to butt out of this fight, but that ticks Randall off. And when Beth says she hasn't said yes to his proposal yet because she hasn't figured out her life yet, and she doesn't want to be consumed by her husband's life, and Randall just seems to want to consume everything, Randall ends up storming off saying, "Don't worry about it, I won't propose again." We then see Beth have a heart-to-heart with Rebecca, who explains that she's happy that Randall has Beth and says Beth doesn't have to worry about losing herself with him because Randall would never let that happen. Rebecca then tells a story of how Randall had an anxiety attack in 11 because he looked up at the sky and realized how small he felt in this universe and didn't know where he fit in. But after Randall met Beth, he called Rebecca and said he no longer felt that way. So Beth then goes and gets Randall and go to her favorite restaurant and have her so-called perfect date. She gets some ginger beer and nachos, and then she says she's ready for him to propose. And he does, and they make a deal saying they're not going to lose themselves in each other and will be equals, a team. Now flash forward to their wedding. Beth has been so busy planning the wedding that she's trying to finish her vows last minute and asks Kate to go stall. So Kate stalls, and in the other room, Randall starts telling Kevin his vows and realizes instead of writing vows actually about Beth and what Beth means to him, he's basically written a dissertation on marriage. But he's starting to rewrite and stall, and for me this was kind of a red flag, you know? Like, we know Randall loves Beth, but the fact that he chose to take this entire time of writing these perfect vows that apparently have stopped him from helping plan this wedding, and all he ended up writing was about marriage and not Beth, it's kind of like this is showing again how Randall gets so focused on one idea that he just kind of forgets everything else. So when Beth learns that Randall is rewriting his vows, she gets mad, she storms into his room, they end up standing back to back, starting to hash things out again, and Randall's kind of like, you feel like you planned this wedding by yourself, and Beth starts to backtrack saying she's just been stressed, and they end up writing their vows together, and of course, they're beautiful. We then flash forward again to baby Tess and the two having an argument at 3 a.m. over baby wipes, leading to them just fighting and being tired about who's supposed to take what shift and who's doing what right, and they end up just being like, okay, let's just go downstairs and have some nachos, which Randall makes for her. Now at this time, Beth is about to have to go back to work after maternity leave, but she isn't sure if she's ready, but she is also still looking forward to going back to work. And they say that they'll, figure it out how to make everything work as far as taking care of baby Tess. And that's again where Beth starts to let out her frustrations with Randall saying that, because she's the one who always has to bend to make things work, she says, because Randall would never quit his job, and it's always about Beth having to lose something. And of course Randall is like, that's not true. So then Beth looks at her nachos and makes an analogy with them about how, without knowing, Randall is the guy who makes the nachos for her but then eats all the whole chips covered in cheese, aka the best part of the nachos, leaving Beth with all the broken chips and crumbs, which just of course offends Randall, who storms off and is like, I'll never eat nachos again. And now we flash forward a little bit more to when both William and Kevin were living at the house, which was definitely kind of a stressful time. Beth says she has a conference in Hershey for the night and leaves while Randall and William go to pick up Annie. But on the way they stop at the store to pick up some more syrup, and guess who is there? Beth is, picking up wine and snacks, and yes, Beth has lied about the conference. She just wanted 24 hours to herself, so she got a hotel room, and she was planning on, just watching some movies and watching some episodes of Living Single. Because while she loves Kevin and William, they're a lot to handle. And Randall's just kind of like, well, why didn't you just, tell me you needed a night off? I would have given it to you. But Beth says that the last time they had this argument and she asked for some time, Randall ended up giving this whole big speech asking, what's wrong, and it turned into another argument that just ended up going on too long that Beth was too tired to go take some time for herself. And once again, Randall's kind of offended and upset about her words, and he's kind of like, I didn't do that. So, Beth is the one who ends up apologizing, and Randall does tell her, you know what, go ahead, go enjoy your night off. And it seems like both are kind of gonna get what they want, but then Randall turns around and starts talking to her about, what episode of Living Single are you going to start with? And they start talking about, these episodes, and then Beth's kind of like, well, now I don't want to watch them without you, and she decides to go home. And Randall does ask, are you sure? And Beth says yes, even though, she doesn't look like she's too happy about it. So now we're back in our present day, and we have now seen this cycle play out many a times. Beth basically says they've been having this fight since they met, where he may not know what he's doing exactly, but he ends up sweet-talking her into doing what he wants and has turned her into Rebecca, she says. Beth then tells Randall to admit that his job is more important than hers, to just come out and say it. And during this part of the fight is where we see a flashback of when Randall overheard Jack and Rebecca fighting, and in a situation that was very similar where Jack was telling Rebecca that singing was not a career. And now Randall thinks that Beth is trying to bully him into saying something awful, like he did in that voicemail, and Beth just points out that they broke their promise of not getting lost in each other a long time ago, and that he actually let her break that promise, because she's been the one bending to his every need, and she actually drops some examples.
Oh, we have kids? I have to step back from my job. You quit your job? I work overtime. You have a dream of buying your father's building. It becomes my dream too. You run for city councilman? I stand by your side.
So she's like, what happens when city council isn't enough for you and something bigger comes along? Like, how is she going to have to bend for that? And she says that she is done bending because she's finally found that dream that she's been holding off on for so long. And she's done listening to his speeches to win her over. And while Randall's like, well, you know what? I'm not buying this act either because you're not a wallflower. And he refuses to be blamed for Beth's awakening happening 20 years too late. And he says he would have been supportive of her dream at any other time. But then she says the thing that goes too far.
Support?
Oh, so when would I have done that, huh? Between which of your anxiety attacks?
So this causes Randall to drive back to Philly and sleep on the couch, where he thinks of the flashback after the first date that they had of him sitting in bed happy, after being rejected by Beth. And Beth also doesn't want to sleep in her bed, and she's thinking of that first date as well, where, she actually returns home smiling with a little bit of hope that maybe this thing with Randall will work out after she told him to not call her again. So what does that all mean? But yeah, that wraps up this week's episode of This Is Us. So we basically just have Randall and Beth in a cycle that has been going on for so many years that it's finally, the crack has turned into a canyon, and now both are dealing with the consequences of, their actions and their words. So what it seems like here is that when Beth finally does speak her mind and say, no, I need a break, I need this, Randall always has the right words to persuade her and bring her back around and to back off. But it doesn't seem like he's actually noticing what he's doing. There's no malicious intent here. It's not premeditated. It's kind of like he's just like an innocent little puppy who's like, wait, no, what do you mean? Like, I want to make things right, and doesn't realize he's persuading Beth to, not, continue to stand up for herself. But it's also Beth's fault too for giving in so easily. She's recognized this cycle going on, and every time it seems like she's like finally done with it, she's the one who does give back in to Randall. So they are both definitely at fault here in this whole cycle that they've been going on. And I actually, made a parallel, or, recognized that the way that Rebecca sat down with Beth and started telling her this story about Randall and how, Beth means everything to him, ended up convincing Beth to go say, okay, Randall proposed to me now. So Rebecca kind of talks in that same way that Randall does. So maybe it's like a learned thing, it's passed on, and they just don't realize what they're doing. But yeah, I'm kind of torn here when it comes between Team Randall and Team Beth. I will admit, which may make some of you mad, I don't know, that I am leaning a bit more towards Beth, but both are definitely not innocent in this argument. Randall, like I said, just doesn't seem to know what he's doing, and we've seen that when he focuses on something, he just loses, sight of other people and their feelings. And he also just kind of wants to always make things right, alleviate situations, but he's not going about it maybe in the right way. He just doesn't think about how it affects the other person. At least that's my 2 cents here, because you may see everything completely differently, and that's why I love reading the comments. So I want you guys to sound off with all your opinions on this whole Randall and Beth fight. But for now, let's look at the promo for the season finale next week.
Do you think we can figure out how we're going to make our way through this?
Sometimes people think they know what they want, but things change.
What would happen if I resigned?
Nurse, we need help over here.
Okay, so this season finale is called Her, which I'm guessing gives us a glimpse maybe into the answer of finally who that future her everybody is going to see. I'm still thinking maybe it's Rebecca and she's sick or something, sadly, which I don't want to happen, but maybe that's what it is. We do see a little bit of a glimpse of future Toby and Randall in the promo. We also have some big conflicts rising for our big three, sounding like Kevin maybe might express how he thinks he can change Zoe's mind about kids. Baby Jack is in danger, and Randall may be fighting with, for his family, asking what happens if he resigns. So is he finally going to let Beth have her moment to shine? I don't know. It's going to be definitely a dramatic season finale. So I want to hear all your thoughts about this week's episode. That wraps up mine. Are you Team Beth or Team Randall? Should there even be teams? Do you think they'll be able to mend this relationship? And who is that her in the future? Let me know, and then don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, the little notification bell so you never miss a video, and you can check out more of the videos that I got right over here. As always, I'm Lisa. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time.